The story of Wanda Jackson doesn't begin with screaming teenagers or flashing lights. It begins with doubt, and in her own words, she once confessed, "Elvis was the one who convinced me to try rock and roll. I might never have done it without him." Those words echo across history like a whispered secret that changed the course of music forever. It was the mid-1950s. America was restless, caught between tradition and rebellion. Elvis Presley had already begun his meteoric rise, electrifying crowds with a mix of gospel soul, country roots, and a swagger no stage had ever seen. He was the king in waiting, a storm about to crown itself. But Wanda Jackson? She was just a teenage girl from Oklahoma, still tethered to the safe world of country music, unsure of where she belonged. The world knew her as polite, pretty, and promising, but not dangerous, not revolutionary, not yet. Picture it. A smoky dance hall somewhere in the South, the air thick with sweat, perfume, and cigarette haze. On stage, Elvis moved with reckless abandon, hips shaking, voice howling, young women clutching their chests as if they couldn't breathe. And backstage, standing quietly in the shadows, Wanda watched with wide eyes, part awe, part fear. She had been raised on fiddles, on church songs, on the clean expectations of small-town life. But here, watching Elvis, she felt something stirring inside her. Something the industry had never encouraged. Something wild. What did Elvis see in her? She wasn't polished like the stars Nashville wanted. She didn't fit neatly into the box the industry had built for women. But Elvis noticed her rawness, the grit in her voice, the spark in her eyes, the hunger she tried to hide. This is not just a story about music. It's about risk, about rebellion, about a young woman daring to step into a world that told her she didn't belong. And it all begins with a single push from the king himself. Wanda Jackson was born in Maud, Oklahoma, in 1937, the daughter of a working-class family with music woven into its bones. In the evenings, neighbors gathered on porches while fiddles and guitars filled the night air. Church choirs echoed through Sunday mornings. To outsiders, it was a quiet, simple upbringing. But for Wanda, every note carried weight. Every song hinted at a future she could only begin to imagine. By the time she was a teenager, her voice was already something remarkable, rougher than the girls around her, grittier than the polished tones Nashville prized. She didn't sound like a fragile country angel, she sounded alive, untamed, and that unsettled people. Teachers, neighbors, even churchgoers whispered that Wanda sang too hard, that her voice wasn't ladylike. But Wanda pressed forward. At 16, she signed with Decca Records, marketed as the next country sweetheart. It was a dream most small-town kids never touched. Yet for Wanda, it quickly felt like a cage. She recorded gentle ballads and sentimental country tunes, the kinds of songs that painted women as tender and soft. They wanted her to smile sweetly, sing about heartbreak, and stay safely within the lines of what a girl from Oklahoma was supposed to be. Her first trips to Nashville only deepened the pressure. Walking into the male-dominated studios, Wanda felt like an intruder. Men in sharp suits controlled the soundboards. Producers barked instructions. Session musicians barely looked her way. She was young, nervous, and constantly reminded of her place. Country music was a man's world, and women who dared to stand out were quietly pushed back down. And yet, there was that voice, raw, vibrant, impossible to polish into something neat. She could feel it pulling against the reins. Country audiences politely applauded her, but something inside Wanda knew she was faking it. She loved country music, yes. It was her foundation, her roots. But when she looked in the mirror after those recording sessions, she wondered if this was really her. What haunted her most was the contradiction. Her voice didn't fit the mold, but neither did her spirit. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't meant to fade into the background. Nashville, though, didn't care. To them, Wanda Jackson was just another country girl in a long line of hopefuls, expected to smile, sing softly, and never break the rules. But rules have a way of crumbling, and in Wanda's case, destiny was already on the road, wearing blue suede shoes. Because somewhere out there, on the same touring circuits, was a young man named Elvis Presley, a man who would take one look at Wanda and tell her she was destined for something the Nashville gatekeepers could never have imagined. By 1955, the touring circuit was a whirlwind of dusty roads, neon-lit roadhouses, and endless nights on stage. Wanda Jackson was still finding her footing, singing her country sets with careful precision. Her father, Tom Jackson, always close by as her chaperone, kept a watchful eye. He was both protector and manager, determined to keep his teenage daughter safe in a business filled with fast talkers and empty promises. But one night changed everything. On the bill was a name that was already beginning to stir whispers across America: Elvis Presley. He was still young, still carving out his path, but the electricity around him was undeniable. He walked on stage, guitar slung low, hips moving with a confidence that seemed almost scandalous. His voice wasn't polite like Nashville wanted. It was wild, soulful, raw, a cry that broke through the polite veneer of post-war America. Backstage, Wanda watched in awe. She later recalled how he transformed a crowd. The kids were screaming, they were out of control. I'd never seen anything like it. In that moment, she understood something that Nashville producers never told her. Music wasn't just about sounding perfect, it was about shaking people's souls. Elvis noticed Wanda. Between shows, he struck up conversations, teasing her in that charming southern drawl. "You still got something sept, Wanda," he told her. "But you still holdin' sept back. You still gotta try this new music. Rock and roll, the kids are going sept crazy for it." Wanda hesitated. She thought of her father, of her conservative country fans, of the quiet life she had been raised to represent. Rock and roll was dangerous, even scandalous. Women didn't growl into microphones. They didn't snarl their way through songs. They smiled sweetly. They played it safe. Still, Elvis persisted. On long car rides between towns, he'd share records. Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Carl Perkins. He'd lean over with a grin and say, "This is the future, and you belong in it." Wanda listened, torn between fear and fascination. The rumors of a romance between the two only deepened the emotional tension. They shared private talks, moments of laughter, the kind of quiet intimacy that lingers long after the spotlight fades. To Wanda, Elvis wasn't just the king in the making. He was a mirror, showing her a version of herself she had never dared to imagine. But doubt gnawed at her. She worried about rejection, from her audience, from the industry, even from her own family. Could she really step into a genre that chewed up women and left them behind? Could she risk being laughed at, dismissed as just a girl trying to sing like the boys? Elvis Presley's confidence was unshakable. His words cut through her hesitation like a knife. "You sep got to do it, Wanda. You sep too good to stay where you are. Don't sep let them put you in a box. Break it." That night on tour wasn't just a performance, it was a turning point. The king had placed a challenge in Wanda's hands, a challenge that would either ignite her future or destroy her career. And soon, she would have to decide if she had the courage to step into the fire. The moment finally came in 1956. Wanda Jackson walked into the studio with Elvis's words echoing in her ears. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew she had to try. The song chosen was "I Gotta Know," a strange hybrid, half country, half rockabilly, a song straddling two worlds. Just like Wanda herself. The producers eyed her skeptically. A girl singing country ballads was safe. A girl snarling her way through a rock song? That was dangerous. Yet Wanda stepped up to the microphone, her heart pounding, her father watching nervously through the glass. She closed her eyes and let loose. Her voice cracked with fire, tearing through the polished walls Nashville had built around her. It wasn't soft, it wasn't delicate, it was raw, real, alive. It was the sound of a woman refusing to be quiet. The reaction was swift. Country DJs refused to play it. They didn't know what to make of her. Was she country or was she rock? And worse, was she a woman stepping into territory that belonged to men? Critics muttered that her voice was too harsh, too brash, even unfeminine. But Elvis had been right. Something about the sound struck a chord with young listeners. Teenagers leaned in, electrified by a girl who sang with the grit of their heroes. Wanda Jackson wasn't just singing songs, she was breaking rules. And yet, the backlash cut deep. Wanda wondered if she had gone too far. She lay awake at night asking herself if Elvis had pushed her in the wrong direction. Was she making a fool of herself? Or was she simply too far ahead of her time? The doubts weighed heavy until 1960, when she recorded "Let's Have a Party." The song was explosive, unapologetic, even a little scandalous. Some stations banned it outright, claiming the lyrics were improper for a young woman. But the kids didn't care. They bought the record, they danced, they screamed the words back at her in concert halls. For the first time, Wanda tasted what Elvis had promised: freedom. The song became her anthem, proof that she could carve her own path. She wasn't just following a trend, she was setting one. But rebellion always comes at a price. Wanda was no longer the safe country girl the industry wanted. She was something new, a woman standing at the front lines of a movement that wasn't ready to accept her. She felt the ground beneath her shift, unsure if it would hold. And as her star began to rise, so too did the walls around her. Because, if Elvis had taught her to step into the fire, the world was now preparing to see if she could survive the burn. Success should have felt sweet. But for Wanda Jackson, breaking into rock and roll was a lonely victory. She was often the only woman on tour bills dominated by men. The posters screamed names like Jerry Lee Lewis, Buddy Holly, and Gene Vincent, and tucked somewhere in smaller print was Wanda Jackson, the girl who dared to sing like them. The road was grueling. Endless towns, long drives, cheap motels. And with each stop, the weight of being the only one pressed heavier. Male colleagues sometimes treated her like a novelty, sometimes like a threat. Rumors swirled. Whispers followed her. What's a girl doing here? Doesn't she know this isn't her place? But Wanda fought back in her own way. Her mother sewed her stage dresses, fringed, flashy, rebellious. They weren't the demure gowns Nashville expected. Instead, they swung and shimmered under the spotlight, daring people to look at her differently. Feminine, yes, but bold, unapologetic. She wanted to prove she could be glamorous and fierce at the same time. Yet the courage on stage masked the loneliness off it. Wanda longed for Elvis's encouragement, but by then, his career had exploded into superstardom. He was gone, swallowed by the machine of fame. She missed the private talks, the laughter, the simple reassurance of someone who believed in her. Without him, she often felt like she was walking through enemy territory alone. The strain took its toll. Nights ended with tears. Days began with doubts. She wondered if the fight was worth it. Was she carving a legacy, or was she slowly breaking under the weight of resistance? And then there was her personal life. She faced heartbreaks, relationships strained by the constant travel, and the scrutiny of her choices. Even after marrying Wendell Goodman, who later became her manager, the balance between love and music was fragile. To stay in rock and roll meant sacrificing stability, security, and sometimes even respect. The larger truth was harsher still. Society wasn't just resisting rock and roll itself, it was resisting the idea of women holding power in it. Wanda wasn't only battling for her career, she was carrying the burden of an entire gender's fight to be heard in a rebellious, dangerous genre. Her voice became a weapon, her songs a battlefield. Each performance was both a triumph and a reminder of how far she stood outside the lines. She was a pioneer, yes, but pioneers are often lonely. And yet, Wanda never quit. She kept singing, kept touring, kept daring to exist in a space the world wanted to deny her. But even pioneers can't outrun time, and decades later, history would finally turn its head back toward Wanda Jackson and recognize the crown she had earned. For years, Wanda Jackson carried the weight of rebellion without the reward. She sang her songs, toured relentlessly, and pushed forward even when the spotlight seemed to pass her by. Other women entered the rock and roll scene later, but Wanda had been the first to kick the door open, and for a long time, no one seemed to remember. But history has a way of circling back. By the late 1980s and into the 90s, a new generation of fans and musicians began to rediscover her work. Young rockers, punk artists, and even country stars spoke her name with reverence. They weren't just hearing her records, they were hearing the defiance in her voice, the trail she had blazed when it wasn't safe for women to do so. Then came the moment that sealed it. 2009. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame finally inducted Wanda Jackson into its hallowed circle. Standing on that stage, decades older but still fiery in spirit, she spoke words that silenced every doubt that had haunted her younger self. She publicly thanked Elvis Presley for pushing her into rock and roll all those years ago. "I might never have done it without him," she admitted, her voice steady, her eyes shining. It was a confession and a tribute all at once. Elvis had been the spark, but Wanda had carried the flame through storms that would have extinguished most. And now, at last, the world was calling her what she always had been, the Queen of Rockabilly. The recognition was more than a personal victory. It was a cultural shift. Wanda's story became proof that women had always belonged in rock, even if the world had refused to see it. From Janis Joplin's raw cries to Joan Jett's snarling anthems, the echoes of Wanda's rebellion rang through the decades. She reflected often on her journey. "I never really felt like I belonged in country music," she admitted in interviews. The truth was simple. Elvis had seen something in her that even she hadn't dared to claim. He saw the grit, the fight, the voice that could break through walls, and he had told her not to be afraid. Now, audiences saw it too. Wanda's legacy wasn't just about her songs, it was about her courage. She had stood on stages where no woman was welcome and refused to sit back down. She had endured the silence, the rejection, the loneliness, and still, she sang. History remembered Elvis Presley as the king of rock and roll, but history also made room for its queen, and her crown wasn't given, it was earned, song by song, mile by mile, in the face of a world that told her no. And in the end, Wanda Jackson's story became more than music. It became a reminder of how one push, one spark, can ignite a legacy that changes everything. When history tells the story of rock and roll, it often crowns Elvis Presley as the king. But kings do not rule alone. Behind the spotlight, in a quiet moment backstage, Elvis gave a teenage country singer the courage to step into the fire. That simple encouragement, a nudge, a push, changed not only her life, but the very fabric of music. Wanda Jackson took that push and turned it into a legacy. She fought through doubt, defied the industry, and carried the burden of being first. She stood alone on stages where no woman was supposed to stand. And though it cost her sleepless nights, heartbreak, and years of being overlooked, her courage carved out a space where women could roar. Her story reminds us that revolutions don't always begin with headlines. Sometimes they begin with a quiet voice saying, "You can do this, you belong here." For Wanda, that voice belonged to Elvis Presley, and for generations of women in rock, that voice now belongs to Wanda. The question is, who belongs to you? Who has pushed you to take a risk, to step outside the safe path, to claim a space that wasn't built for you? And more importantly, are you listening? Because Wanda Jackson's journey is proof that one moment of encouragement can spark a lifetime of change. It can turn a small-town girl into the Queen of Rockabilly. It can shift the course of music itself. So if this story stirs something inside you, don't let it end here. Share it. Talk about it. Keep their voices alive. The king who saw potential, and the queen who dared to claim it. Elvis Presley gave Wanda Jackson a push. She turned it into a legacy. And that legacy still dares us, even now, to break the boxes the world tries to put us in.